think you have to use this in Hollywood, but I'm dedicated. Pretty bird. Pretty bird. This carburetor can deliver more fuel and air to your bike than your bike can handle. We're gonna take this whole carb apart, we're gonna clean it, and then we're gonna reassemble it. Oh, look at that. Like a 7-year-old man trying to take a piss. We're just gonna unscrew this puppy. We're gonna take this off. We're gonna pull out the accelerator pump. Ta-da! Let's get the float out of here. There we go. Whee, fun. Now, if I look down here, it's disgusting in there. So treat this whole thing with love and affection. Might need to use the garlic, we don't know. Take it off gently. Look at that puppy. This guy is ready. Onto the float bowl and a sip of beer to make it go down easy. And I'm gonna go in and kind of rough it up, pull some of that out. All right, off the ultrasonic cleaner we go. Let's begin. All right, we're back, motherfuckers. So now we're going to reassemble this carburetor. What we have done here, we've taken this apart, run it through the ultrasonic cleaner, and then I took it to the soda blaster. Just baking soda, blast the body. I only do that because it leaves a nice uniform finish on the carbs. They can tend to get a little splotchy or dark after you clean them because it is just porous cast aluminum. So it's not anything super fancy. I mean, I've seen people paint these, which I think is you know what, whatever. If you want to paint it, go on with your bad self. But yeah, I just put it through an ultrasonic cleaner. And what I put in there is typically some simple green, and then I'll add like a citrus cleaner as well. And that tends to get rid of any varnish, grease, any dirt, any gross buildup. I'm gonna run a Q-tip through a few places here, a swab, and make sure everything's clean. Now let's move on to reassembling this bitch. Now we have a lot of little parts here. We're also gonna be bringing parts in from our performance rebuild kit. We have a new slide. We're gonna put a slide cover on this as well as a velocity stack. We're going with all black today. So let's first assemble our accelerator pump. So we have a little rubber dust cover boot that goes back on the little brass post here. Beautiful, it should look like that. There it is, perfect. Here is the accelerator pump arm. We're set up through the boot so it sticks out. Scooch the boot, and you're gonna orient these two holes with the spot they go on the bottom. It's kind of straightforward. If you can't figure that out, we have much bigger problems on our hands today. So here's the base of the accelerator pump. You're gonna put your spring in here, and we're gonna get our bolts out so we're ready to bolt this together. Our machine screws. Oh, beautiful, just beautiful. I'm gonna use the old slide cover to hold all the bolts. Sometimes when I make these videos, it's hard for me to remember like, hey, not everybody has that at home. So I do try to bring in, hey, before I had this wonderful tool, here's what I did. For instance, if you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, you can get some carb cleaner, some pressurized air, and blow the shit out of these things. Clean them off as best you can, get some swabs in there, clean out all the ports, make sure everything's clear with compressed air. There's other ways to do it. You don't have to have fancy equipment. So now we're gonna get our bolts here. God damn it, machine screws. And you're gonna wanna use 3 of the short screws. And we're going to use our parking lot special. I'm gonna pull our D-bit out of here. If you got one of those D-bits, you got a buddy who's got a bike, always good to pass it along. So our spring goes here. Make sure you tighten these till they snap off. It will make the process 10 times longer. Just another excuse to buy more beer, I guess. You don't want to crank these little things down. Once they stop screwing in, that's pretty much it. Try and do this so you guys can see what I'm doing here. Now to check function, make sure it's working, we're gonna pull this lever up here. You can see the rod goes down and pops right back up. Beautifulous. Smooth operation, amazing. Now let's move to the main body of the car. Set our float bowl aside here, and we're going to rebuild the float bowl chamber. So we have our main jet holder here, and in our performance rebuild kit, we have a number of jets. There's our float bowl gasket, our vacuum plugs, which are very important. Some shims, jets, we got a float needle here, and we have 2 needle shims. I'm gonna tune this for open pipes and velocity stack. I'm gonna take a 148, because we are at sea level. I may need a 150, depending on how worn in that bike is, depending on what it wants. There's no magic formula for tuning a bike. I get the question all the time, hey, which jets in the kit should I use? Welcome to tuning. To address this, we do have a free e-tuning handbook, or ebook that's for tuning that is available. If you're interested in that, please drop us a comment. We will be posting a link to it in this video. If you are on Instagram, you can send me a message, and I can also provide you a link that way. Hat is on, beer sipped. Glass is cleaned. Back to your regularly programmed shit. Back to your regularly scheduled programming. You're gonna take your main jet holder. I'm gonna run this 148 jet. We're gonna screw it in by hand to the main jet holder. Main jet holder goes right here. Oh, actually, we're missing a step. We need to put it back in our needle jet, this little guy. Now, if you remember, bad end goes in first. We're gonna drop it right down here. Make sure it sticks through into the Venturi. Zoom in on that. It should be sticking out right there. That's the needle jet. Earlier, I mentioned these little things here. What these are for is to clean jets. There are a bunch of different wire sizes. Some have ridges on them. These are really helpful if you have a jet or an emulsion tube here with tiny holes that you need to unplug. You can run it through there and it gets any schmoo out of that hole. And you guys are obsessed with schmoo holes. So if you have jets that are dirty in a carb and you cannot afford to buy them, this is a very cheap little tool set. K&L makes one. I think Motion Pro makes one. They're everywhere. But it's basically a little tiny cleaner kit. It has many different sizes. You can clean the bore of the jets out in a pinch if you are on a budget. Thankfully, we're dealing with new jets here, but I did want to mention what these could be for if I didn't have a whole new jet kit to put in here. So now we take our main jet holder, put it in place. We're going to get our 7mm wrench and it'll stop. Like, that's it. It's done. Now you want to take the 7mm wrench, hold your main jet holder, screwdriver, and just snug down that main jet. That's it. If you deform the jet, that's bad. You're being too strong. Now we're going to put a pilot jet in here. I'm going to go with the 45 or 48. Same thing with this jet. It gets a little harder to turn, yes, but then it actually stops. There's a stopping point. That's when you stop. So what I'm going to do is a very special trick. This one trick has saved me so many headaches in working on bikes. It's so stupid simple, but it's super helpful. So all you need is some Mother's mag and aluminum wheel polish. So then what you're gonna need is a drill. All right, you got your drill here. You're gonna get a few of these little Q-tips. Gonna get a little bit of the polish, kind of rolling it around, getting it into the cotton. Now we're gonna chuck this up. Up chuck. And you're gonna put this in the float valve vertically and spin. I turn the speed on the drill down pretty low. All right, look at all that shit's coming out of there. So the thing is with varnish and any kind of corrosion on the brass, you're not gonna know it's there until you try to clean it off. You look like, oh, it looks fine, but your eyes can't see the microscopic changes in the surface that are going to negatively affect your float valve. So I'm taking some of the cotton off this guy so I can get it in here. This is a custom swab now.
TJ Brutal custom swabs.
Yeah, should we carry swabs in our website? Leave me a comment. Should we carry custom swabs for you guys? All right, look, this is my swabbing technique, spinny swabby technique. Oh, I'm reaming the swab hole. All right, I'm gonna get another one of these guys. I'm gonna do almost the same thing, except I'm gonna put Mother's on this one and get down there and spin this guy on the surface of the valve. Look how gross that is. It's freaking disgusting. Now we can get all this excess off the top. Careful, you don't want to get this pushed down inside the edges here. Be very careful about that. So I want you to see now how shiny that float seat is. How clean it is, beautiful. Just beautiful. Word from our sponsors. Here at TJ Brutal Customs, we believe in delivering the best customer service to our customers. If you reach out to our customer service department, you're guaranteed to get treated with kid gloves and be left with a slap on the ass. Thanks for watching, and now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Now we're going to get our float needle assembly put together. It's gonna slide the float needle up into the float itself, like that. Just drops right in there, boop. And then we're going to set this in the float valve. So once you've set the float and float needle into the valve, you're gonna take the hinge here, the little hinge pin, and put it back through the posts. Ta-da! Make sure the float moves up and down freely, IP freely. So our next step is going to be to replace the ACV, air cutoff valve cover. You don't have to use this thing. It's not necessarily going to help your bike. So what we do with it, you reinstall it, like so. Always gotta find the hole. Screw this guy in. And now we're going to take one of our handy dandy vacuum plugs and just push it right over that nipple. Ta-da! Beautiful. Now let's get this accelerator pump and float bowl installed. Now for the accelerator pump, I'm gonna take this little arm here, and we're gonna put this big washer we took off on first, and hold that up. Take your plastic cup, put it on the top of this right here, and we're gonna thread that arm through. Set the bowl on the main body of the carb. Spring goes fat end down into the plastic cup, centers in this arm here, and you're gonna take your smaller washer, put it on top of the arm, push it down with your fingers like so, take your baby cotter pin, put it right in there, just like that. See? That's what it should do. So now we're gonna bend the legs of that cotter pin back. Now here's a fun little treat for you guys. See this arm? What this arm does is it stops the accelerator pump at a certain point, right there. Now I've seen people chop this off, which you can do, but it's also pretty easy just to do this. Now, you got a little bit more juice. Not much, just a tad bit more out of that accelerator pump. It's a free upgrade, you guys. Free. So now we have our float bowl assembled, looks beautiful. We're going to actually put the float bowl gasket in now. Just take your gasket, put a right chair, fit it in the float bowl, and drop the carb in. Paying attention that you don't roll the edges over or get them stuck. There's a gap between the float bowl and the carb. That's going to be closed once I bolt it together. You can see that's a visible gap. And I'll show you how that closes up. So you're going to put one corner in just till it touches the float bowl. Put one of the screws in one corner of the float bowl. Don't tighten it down. You're going to come across the other corner of the float bowl. It's kitty corner, I think they call that. And do the same thing. Now the float bowl's not going to go anywhere. Let's get the rest of our screws in there. Now we can start tightening down. And when those screws stop, just stop. You don't have to go back and forth like this, star pattern or anything like that. Just go around the carb. Tighten that float bowl down. Now you can see the gap is gone. That's a good thing. So we should hopefully not have any leaks out of this puppy. See, what are we missing? We are missing our slide assembly and slide cover. Gonna take our slide that we got in our kit, lift up the diaphragm. Now here's the old one. I wanna show you guys something. There's a cut in the diaphragm. That's a vacuum leak. A lot of people think vacuum leaks are just gonna happen at the boot, but this is gonna give you hell. If you try to tune with a broken diaphragm, it's not gonna happen. Really important, if you take this apart, make sure you inspect your diaphragm. If you don't have, any cuts, you might be able to use them, but I like to run my finger underneath. And if you hold it up to a light, you'll be able to see the sunlight come through. So if you look down there, you can see that's a huge cut. So this diaphragm is toast. We're gonna use our nice new one. Gonna get our needle out of here. We have a little spring. Spring goes on the needle retainer. We're gonna take our two washers here. They are needle shims. They're tiny brass, very thin needle shims. They go on the needle. Needle's gonna go in the center hole of our slide. I'll take my nut driver here. And like so. There we go. Get Phillips to finish this off. There we go. Now you see your needle is going to have a little bit of a spring to it, bounciness. I'll show you a difference here in a stock versus the aftermarket kit. This is the stock jet needle retainer. If you pull the spring off, the post here is taller than the piece that we include with our kit. If you want to shim your needle, you're going to need to get a small set of dikes or nippers or flush cutters. These guys are great. Get in here and snip off that post. Now you're gonna have to do from one side like this, snip, and then I go in for another side, snip. The base is the only part that really matters because it's holding the spring centered, but that'll allow you to add two shims to your needle and actually still let the needle flex a bit. It's always good to have spare parts. I keep this shit on hand. You never know when everything's gonna stop being manufactured and your buddy gets one and he's like, oh, I wanna rebuild the car, but for some reason TJ Brutal Customs died in the nuclear blast and you're the only one that has one of these. So now we have our slide figured out. Something that you might want to do if you're going to reuse your slide diaphragm, when you disassemble the carb, this is more prevalent on the dual carbs because they don't have a locating tab, but what you can do is mark on your slide with a paint marker where the engine is. Now the reason you do that is because if you look underneath here, you can see there's holes in a line. The bigger hole, boop, needs to be towards the engine. So if you reassemble this and it's cocked the wrong way, you're gonna have a hard time tuning. It's gonna be no fun. So with our slide assemblies, we do have a locating ear right there. So this makes your job a lot more easy. When you put the carb back together, the holes are lined up with this hole here towards the engine. Voila. So what I do when I put these together, oh, you know what? We got to get our slide cover out. Ta-da! Here's one of the last of these slide covers. If you guys think we should make more slide covers, leave me a comment. I'm gonna start taking votes. If you guys think we should make a slide cover, let us know if you want black or brass or aluminum. So if we get enough votes, we will do a pre-order, but I have to have the data there that shows there's enough people that actually want them to put them into production. So now we have our slide cover with our slide cover bolts. The bolts that come with the performance rebuild kit, there are bolts in here that will fit the stock slide cover. When you buy a slide cover from us, they have longer bolts to accommodate the slide cover design. Gonna take the slide cover with a little ear facing the front of the carb, like that. I put my finger inside the venturi. Spring goes here. Take the slide cover, put the spring centered and push down till you hit this mating surface. Keeping this intact, held down. Start getting your bolts in. There we go. Now what's really important here is that you don't let the edge of that diaphragm get curled over. And that's why I put my finger up inside the venturi to hold the slide up, which keeps the outer ring of that diaphragm centered in the channel of the main carb body that holds that diaphragm in place. If you get it rolled over or pinched, you're gonna have another vacuum leak. Same situation as if you have a tear in the diaphragm. All right, I'm gonna tighten that one down, turn this one, and put our other screw in. It's looking so pretty. Yes, magnetic. Okay, stop, just stop. Now, a carburetor's job is to do one thing well, to suck. That is to suck air and fuel in and create an atomized mixture, which your engine can then use. So, vacuum leaks in the diaphragm, the edge of the sealing surface here, they can all play a part in your tuning process. If you want to have a bad time tuning, be sloppy, don't pay attention to detail. But if you want to make the tuning process fun, enjoyable, and successful, pay attention to those surfaces. Make sure you don't have any crap on them or, gasket maker or dirt or dust. So now we've installed our slide cover. There's a little bit of schmoo down there in the bottom of the venturi, so I am going to take a Q-tip. Swab, sorry guys, swab. Can't use brand names on the show. All right, I'm just gonna wipe this stuff out. Oh yeah, a little dirt out there. So I'll put a little carb cleaner on this swab. And we'll wipe some of that carbon off. This is probably not doing a whole lot of harm, but I like having clean carburetors. See all that stuff that's coming off? Oof. Clean that up. So now we're going to replace our float bowl drain screw. You got a little gasket here. We cleaned the drain screw off. We've cleaned the float bowl itself. So I'm gonna put this O-ring on here. Now the O-ring's back on the screw. We're gonna come down here and screw this into the float bowl. All right, tighten down that screw. Just don't wanna leak anything anywhere. Now we have a nipple on the back here. Some carbs, you're gonna see a nipple back here. You don't need to use these. This actually went to your cutoff valve and it has a valve opening right inside the back of the venturi here. So you don't want air coming in through this. That is no bueno. So we'll take another one of our vacuum plugs here. See if I can fit this over the top here. These vacuum plugs that we offer are fuel resistant and heat resistant as well. Over time they will get hard, but the seal won't break. Now, if you remove them after you've been running them for a while, you're gonna need to replace them. They last an incredibly long time if you don't move them. And I've always been happy with the performance, and that's why we use the vacuum plugs that we do. Not a whole lot left to do to this. We need to reinstall our idle control screw. That's this long guy here. Put our washer on and spring, and it screws in right underneath the throttle. There's an arm for the throttle right here, screws in at the base. You're gonna wanna set this up so that it's just past, just like almost in the middle of a tiny, tiny hole in there. Let's see if I can get it set up. On the very bottom of the carb, you can see, I'm gonna use a screwdriver to reference. There's a hole right there. There's another one farther down, right below the lip of that butterfly. Let me get a light in here and I'll see if I can shed some light on the situation. You can see the tiny, tiny hole just in front of the butterfly there. I'm gonna manipulate the idle screw so you can see where that hole is. See the hole exposing itself now? Now it's gonna be part of Megan's Law, expose itself publicly. You wanna set your butterfly so it's just barely revealing that hole. I gotta see it from this side, sorry. There we go, right about there. You may need to turn your idle screw to open that butterfly more to get an acceptable idle. However, this is a good starting point. Next step, remember we kept this little hose? If you don't have one, just get a small length of hose to replace this. This is your float bowl breather. If this is plugged, fuel can't go in or out of your float bowl because the pressure cannot equalize. So you just take this guy, push it back onto the nipple here, and thread it through that little holder. If this is broken, you can just let this hang. You can thread it back here behind the fuel line. You can zip tie it once the fuel line's on. You can put a zip tie here so it just runs down the side. But this has to be open with a little bit of length of hose on it. You could just leave it open, I suppose, but then there is a risk of, some dust getting in there. I don't think is a real concern considering that this is facing the back of the bike. Unless you have people doing burnouts, kicking dust all over you, it's not gonna be an issue. The slide breather, this little spot here, ventilates straight into the slide chamber. And when we install the stack, you'll notice the stack does not cover that. Okay, now we need to reinstall our choke, and we're gonna use a shorty choke knob. So here we have the shorty choke knob, goes where our stock choke went. You're gonna thread it in. It is plastic, be gentle. And to make sure it is down solid, you're gonna get a 14 millimeter wrench and gently snug it down. It is plastic, be tender. There we go. What's nice about this is when you pull it up, it stays in place. Easy. On the stock choke, when they wear out, you pull them and they like to go back in ever so slowly. And then they aren't really acting as a choke or enrichment knob. They are kind of half-assing the job. You gotta hold it open. This choke knob, super easy. Pull it, stays in place. When you're done, do not run with your choke knob open. And yes, it's not a choke, it's an enrichment valve. There we go. Our next step here is going to be installing our air fuel mixture screw. TJ Brutal Customs long-handled air fuel mixture screw. Does include the spring, metal, a washer, and a rubber O-ring that you need to install. Now, make sure that you did not leave anything in this hole. If there's another rubber O-ring, a washer, you are gonna be in a sad state of affairs when you go to try to tune. Here's my flashlight. Absolutely clear, beautiful. I turn the carb upside down, boop, and start threading that biatch in until it stops. Not until you crank, it literally is a hard stop. Stop right there, turn the carb towards you. And if you look at the front of the carb here, we're kind of right between the 4 and the 1. So I'm gonna back us out to 1. That's gonna be our base setting. I'm gonna back this out 2.5 turns. So come back to 1, that's 1, 2, 3, facing the front of the carb is 2.5 turns out. This is a great place to start. You may need to go 3 turns. Generally speaking, if you're at 3 turns out, look at the pilot jet. Go up a size of the pilot jet. I have had bikes where the pilot jet's pretty big and I'm at 3.5 to 4 turns out. If you're at 5, it's definitely your pilot jet. You can't get your bike to idle right, your pilot's too small. That is if you're running an open intake, open exhaust. Okay, now we have our air fuel mixture screw installed. Only thing left to do here is put on our velocity stack. And I'm actually gonna take these jets. We also in our kits include a jet needle in case you lost yours. We're gonna keep that garlic out just in case we need that. Before we get on the velocity stack actually, reason we have these zip ties out here. Take your idle control screw, put it up like this, okay? just to show you where it's going to go. I take one zip tie, put it through the ring here, and pull it tight to about there. Don't clip that off yet. Now thread this zip tie through the ring you just made, the hoop. Put this little tiny zip tie in the channel here on your idle control screw, and tighten this zip tie down. And you can tighten this one. So now you have a convenient location for your idle adjustment. Get some flush cup nippers. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful. If you're an animal, cut them at an angle so whoever touches it gets cut. There you go. Now your idle control screw is not dangling on your exhaust or your case cover. So now let's put this velocity stack on. Little grub screws here. We have a few installed on the velocity stack already to save us some time. We're going to use our included hex key to back all these out. So we're going to loosen the set screws on here, and we're going to push the screen out the bottom. Screen's going to go over the venturi here, and we're going to make sure all those set screws are backed out. They are. We're going to orient this with a logo up top, press it down. Beautiful. And now we tighten our set screws. Now, I do recommend using some Loctite or locking agent of some kind on these set screws. In some rare cases, one or two might back off, but a locking agent, little red Loctite or blue, whichever is your preference. I use red on these, is a little bit of insurance. So ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a beautiful carb. Now let's go over this and make sure we're not missing anything. I do see we're missing something. Now there's two Phillips screws here, which are unsightly in my opinion. If they're not screwed up, you don't need to mess with them, but I do include two button head stainless bolts to replace these. They just look sexy. Now, these might be stuck. If you can't get them out with a regular screwdriver, try to strip those. This is a manual impact driver, okay? The reason I have all these towels here is because I'm gonna orient the top of the carburetor over here, and I'm gonna put the impact driver in the screw. I don't want to do this because this side of the carb, there's stuff that could break. So I'm gonna try and go on the top end where it's not all weak. Doesn't take a lot to get this to work. You just tap it a few times. There it goes. And it starts unscrewing. Beautiful. There's our short one. We can replace it with this one. Sexy. Okay, so I've got my metric Allen keys here. 3mm. Just snug it down for now. Let's see if this screw backs itself out without any assistance. That's much easier. And here's another one. You can use the long screw here. And now we can tighten these down. Now, as you can see, it doesn't do anything performance-wise, really doesn't make the carb any better. It just looks nice. It's okay. You know, I'm not gonna make fun of someone who has Phillips screws there, but we include these bolts for a reason, and it just dresses up the carb a little better. Ladies and gentlemen, you have successfully rebuilt your single carburetor. How easy was that? Absolutely bitchin'. If you like this video, had a good time with us, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, all right? And leave us some comments. You know, we'd love to hear what you think about the video. Love to hear any ideas for videos you have in the future. And if you are interested, let us know that you want to be part of our mailing list. We have a good guy and bad guy mailing list. Bad guys get cat poop in a box. Good guys get dog poop in a box. They both suck, but you know, you're welcome to choose one. Thank you all for joining us. Do fun shit.